No one noticed the small light flicker on in the attic window that night. It was the kind of detail people only remembered later, after everything had already fallen apart. The kind of detail that made them whisper, "If only we had paid attention." The house itself looked like any other on Maplewood Lane, a quiet suburban street tucked somewhere between routine and dreams. White fences, trimmed lawns, a flag swaying gently in the evening breeze. From the outside, it carried the comforting promise of normalcy, the kind that made neighbors feel safe walking their dogs after sunset. But inside the house, something had been forgotten. And not just something, someone. The attic room had no lock, no welcome mat, no sign that it belonged to a child. It was small, with slanted walls and a single dusty window that stared at the stars like it was searching for answers. A mattress lay on the floor, thin and uneven, with a blanket folded too neatly for someone so young. In the corner sat a cardboard box filled with drawings, crayons pressed hard against paper, as if the child who made them feared they might disappear if they didn't draw loudly enough. That child's name was Eli, and for reasons no one spoke about anymore, Eli had learned how to be quiet. Downstairs, laughter floated through the living room. A television played a familiar sitcom. Plates clinked in the kitchen. Life moved on, comfortably unaware of the weight pressing down on the attic ceiling. Eli sat on the edge of his mattress, knees pulled close to his chest. He was 9 years old, but there was something older in his eyes, something shaped by waiting, waiting to be called, waiting to be seen, waiting for footsteps on the stairs that never came. He pressed his ear against the wall, listening. Nothing. He exhaled slowly, the way he had taught himself to do when his chest felt too tight. His teacher once said breathing helped when you were overwhelmed. Eli had tried to tell her he wasn't overwhelmed, just invisible, but the bell rang before he could finish. Earlier that day, he had stood in the school hallway as parents rushed past, calling out names, hugging children, complaining about traffic. Eli had waited by the wall, backpack clutched tightly, watching each child disappear into a familiar embrace. No one called his name. Eventually, he walked home alone. That was how it usually went. Eli wasn't loud. He didn't get into trouble. He didn't break things or demand attention. He had learned early that the quieter you were, the less space you took up, and the less likely you were to be a burden. Adults liked children who were easy, but easy children were often forgotten. In the living room below, his father leaned back on the couch, eyes fixed on the screen. His stepmother scrolled through her phone, half listening to the show, half thinking about tomorrow's errands. They both assumed Eli was somewhere upstairs, the way people assume lights will turn off on their own, or dishes will wash themselves if left long enough. Neither of them looked up. The stairs creaked softly as Eli took a cautious step down. He paused halfway, heart pounding, hoping just once that someone would notice, that someone would turn around and say, "There you are." But the moment passed. He quietly returned to the attic. That night, as rain began tapping gently against the roof, Eli reached into the cardboard box and pulled out a drawing. It showed a small boy standing beneath a massive tree, his arms stretched wide. Above him, written in uneven letters, were the words, "I am still here." He traced the letters with his finger. "I know," he whispered to the empty room. The attic smelled faintly of dust and old memories. It had once been a storage space for holiday decorations and forgotten furniture. But over time, it became Eli's world. Not because anyone told him to live there, but because no one asked him not to. There were no bedtime stories anymore. No gentle reminders to brush his teeth. No one asked how his day had been. At school, teachers described him as well-behaved and independent, words that sounded like praise but felt like a quiet goodbye. On his birthday last year, Eli had waited all day for someone to remember. He didn't expect gifts. He didn't expect a party. Just a sentence would have been enough. "Happy birthday." When night came and no one said anything, he took a marker and wrote the date on the attic wall. He stood back, staring at it for a long time, as if memorizing proof that the day had existed at all. Rain grew heavier, drumming against the roof like distant footsteps. Eli lay down, pulling the blanket over himself. His stomach growled softly, but he ignored it. Hunger was something you could get used to if you pretended it didn't matter. What hurt more was the quiet. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that felt like the world had moved on without you. He closed his eyes and imagined a different house. One where voices called his name. One where doors opened instead of staying shut. One where someone noticed the light in the attic window and wondered who it belonged to. Downstairs, the television clicked off. "Long day," his father muttered. "Tomorrow will be busy," his stepmother replied, already heading toward the bedroom. Lights went out, doors closed. Silence settled over the house like a heavy blanket, except in the attic. Eli stared at the ceiling, counting the cracks, each one familiar. He whispered stories to himself. Stories where forgotten children were found, where quiet didn't mean invisible, where love didn't have to be earned by disappearing. Outside, the rain began to slow. Inside, a child remained unseen, and though no one realized it yet, the tears of a forgotten child have a way of changing everything, especially when they fall quietly enough for the world to ignore them. The next morning arrived without announcement. Sunlight crept through the attic window, slipping past the dusty glass and landing softly on Eli's face. He stirred, not because he felt rested, but because his body had learned to wake before disappointment had a chance to settle in too deeply. Morning was safer when it came quietly. He sat up and listened. Downstairs, cabinets opened and closed. Water ran. Voices spoke, but not to him. Eli waited. 5 seconds. 10. A full minute. No one called his name. He swung his legs over the edge of the mattress and stood. The attic floor was cold beneath his feet, but he didn't flinch. He had grown used to discomfort, the way people grow used to background noise. You noticed it at first. Then eventually it became part of you. He folded his blanket neatly, even though no one would see it. He always did. Not because he was told to, but because he hoped one day someone might walk in and think, "This child tries." That thought gave him strength. Eli made his way downstairs slowly, careful not to draw attention. He paused at the bottom step, watching the kitchen from the shadows. His father stood by the counter, coffee in hand, already dressed for work. His stepmother flipped through a planner, her eyes scanning the page like she was searching for something urgent. "Did you see my keys?" his father asked. "They're probably where you left them," she replied, distracted. Eli cleared his throat. It came out softer than he intended. Neither of them turned around. He tried again. Good morning." This time his stepmother glanced back briefly, as though surprised by a sound she hadn't expected to hear. "Oh, you're up," she said, not unkindly, just indifferently. "Yes," Eli replied. There was a pause, a space where something should have happened. "Well," his father said, checking his watch, "I'm running late." He grabbed his keys and headed for the door. "No, have a good day. No, do you need anything?" The door closed. Silence rushed back in, filling the kitchen like water filling an empty glass. Eli stood there, unsure what to do next. His stepmother gathered her things. "I have errands," she said, already halfway to the hallway. "Make sure you stay out of trouble." "I will," Eli whispered, but she was already gone. The house fell quiet again. Eli opened the refrigerator. Inside were leftovers in labeled containers, bottles of condiments, and a single note stuck to the shelf with a magnet. It read, "Dinner at 7. Don't forget." He stared at the note for a long moment, then closed the fridge without taking anything. At school, Eli blended into the background like chalk dust on a blackboard. His classroom buzzed with energy. Children talking about weekend plans, favorite shows, things they had done with people who cared enough to ask. Eli sat at his desk, hands folded, eyes forward. "Group projects today," the teacher announced cheerfully. "Find a partner." Chairs scraped against the floor. Names were called. Laughter broke out. Eli waited. No one looked his way. He raised his hand slowly. "I can work alone," he said, trying to sound confident. The teacher hesitated. "Are you sure?" Eli nodded. He had learned that agreeing quickly made things easier for everyone else. "All right," she said, turning away. And just like that, he was alone again. During lunch, Eli sat at the end of the table, picking at his food. He watched as kids traded snacks and shared jokes, their voices overlapping in a way that made the room feel alive. He wondered what it felt like to be noticed without trying. A boy bumped into his table, nearly knocking over his tray. "Oh, sorry," the boy muttered, already walking away. Eli whispered, "It's okay," even though the boy didn't hear him. By the end of the day, his head felt heavy, not from thinking, but from holding everything in. The walk home felt longer than usual. Clouds gathered overhead, thick and gray, pressing low against the sky. Eli liked cloudy days. They matched how he felt inside. When he reached the house, the door was locked. He checked the time. Still early. He sat on the porch steps, backpack beside him, watching leaves tumble across the driveway. Minutes passed, then more. Neighbors walked by, nodding politely. One woman smiled at him. "Waiting for someone?" she asked. "Yes," Eli said. She waved and continued on her way. Eventually the door opened. His stepmother stepped inside without looking back, leaving it ajar behind her. Eli followed. He went straight to the attic. The room greeted him like an old friend. Quiet, familiar, unchanged. He pulled out his box of drawings and added a new one. This time he drew a house with many windows. In every window there was light, except one. That one was dark. He didn't label the drawing. He didn't need to. That evening, as dinner time approached, Eli stood at the top of the stairs listening. Plates were set. Food was served. No one called him. He waited. 7 o'clock came and went. At 7:20, he quietly went downstairs. His father looked up, surprised. "Oh, I thought you ate already." Eli shook his head. His stepmother glanced at the clock. "You should have said something." "I didn't want to interrupt," Eli replied. They exchanged a look. Not angry, not concerned. Just tired. "Well, grab a plate," his father said. Eli did, though the food was already cold. As he ate, he noticed something strange, a tightness in his chest, sharper than usual. His hands trembled slightly as he held his fork. "Are you okay?" his stepmother asked absently. "Yes," Eli said quickly. The truth was, he didn't know. That night back in the attic, Eli sat by the window, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one. His chest still felt heavy, like something was pressing down from the inside. He wiped his eyes, surprised to find them wet. "I'm still here," he whispered again. But this time the words didn't comfort him the way they used to. The silence had changed. It wasn't just empty anymore. It was growing. And somewhere deep inside Eli, something fragile was beginning to crack, quietly, invisibly, just like everything else that had been forgotten. The first sign that something was wrong came quietly, just like everything else in Eli's life. It started as a dull ache behind his eyes. At first he ignored it. Ignoring things had become second nature. Feelings, hunger, loneliness, pain. If you didn't acknowledge them, they didn't get in the way. At least that's what Eli believed. But this ache didn't fade. It followed him through the day, lingering as he walked to school, as he sat in class, as he stared at the board without really seeing the words written across it. The teacher's voice sounded far away, like it was coming from the end of a long tunnel. "Eli," he blinked. "Yes," he answered. "Can you read the next paragraph?" He stood slowly, the room tilting just a little as he opened his book. The words swam. He tried to focus, but the letters refused to stay still. I'm sorry," he said softly. "I can't see it clearly." A few kids turned to look at him. The teacher frowned slightly. "Are you feeling okay?" "Yes," Eli said again out of habit. The teacher nodded, though concern briefly crossed her face. "You can sit down." Eli did, his heart beating faster than usual. He pressed his fingers against his temple, hoping the pressure would make the ache disappear. It didn't. At recess, he stayed seated on the bench near the fence, watching other children run across the playground. Their laughter echoed loudly, bouncing off the metal bars and the concrete walls. He used to wish someone would invite him to play. Now he just hoped no one would notice him sitting alone. A girl from his class passed by, slowed down, then stopped. "Why do you always sit here?" she asked, not unkindly, just curious. Eli shrugged. "I like watching." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Okay." And just like that, she ran back to the others. Eli leaned his head back against the fence, closing his eyes. The ache had spread now, sinking deeper, making his chest feel tight. He took shallow breaths, counting them the way he had taught himself. 1, 2, 3. I'm fine, he told himself. But something inside him whispered back, no, you're not. That afternoon, the sky darkened earlier than usual. Clouds gathered again, heavy and low, as if the day itself was carrying too much weight. Eli walked home slower than normal. His backpack felt heavier. His legs felt weak. When he reached the house, the door was unlocked. That alone felt strange. Inside, the television was on, but no one was watching. Voices came from the kitchen, his father and stepmother talking quietly, their words blending together, indistinct. Eli stepped inside, hesitating. No one noticed. He stood there for a moment, then moved toward the stairs. Halfway up, a wave of dizziness washed over him. He grabbed the railing tightly, his vision blurring. He waited for someone to say his name. No one did. He continued up to the attic, each step slower than the last. Once inside, Eli sat down on the mattress, pressing both hands to his chest. His heart felt like it was working too hard, beating louder than it should. His breathing came faster now, shallow and uneven. He lay back, staring at the ceiling. I'm okay, he whispered. But the room didn't answer. Time passed strangely in the attic. Minutes stretched. Thoughts drifted in and out. Eli thought about his drawings, about the house with many windows, about the one dark window he had drawn without thinking. He wondered if that window was him. Downstairs, dinner was being prepared. Pots clanged. Plates were set. Life continued, busy and full. In the attic, Eli sat up suddenly, a sharp pain shooting through his head. He gasped, clutching his chest again. This time, fear crept in. He tried to stand, but his legs trembled beneath him. He sank back down, heart racing. Help, he whispered. The word felt strange in his mouth. He tried again, louder. Help! No response. Tears welled up in his eyes, not from pain alone, but from the realization that no one was listening. He reached for his drawings, pulling one free with shaking hands. It was an old one, a small boy holding a balloon, smiling up at the sky. Eli stared at it, tears spilling over. I tried, he whispered to the empty room. I really did. The pain eased slightly, then returned, stronger. His breath came in short bursts. Panic settled in, heavy and cold. He thought about calling out again, but a familiar thought stopped him. I don't want to bother them. The idea hurt more than the pain itself. Downstairs, his father laughed at something on TV. His stepmother responded with a tired smile. Neither of them noticed the silence above them, growing heavier. Eli lay back down, his eyes fixed on the ceiling. The cracks he once counted now blurred together. I'm still here, he whispered again. But for the first time, he wasn't sure if it was true. And as the house continued its normal rhythm below, a child upstairs faded quietly into the background, hurting, unseen, and wondering if being invisible meant disappearing completely. The attic grew colder as evening settled in, not because the temperature had dropped, but because Eli's body no longer knew how to keep itself warm. He lay curled on the thin mattress, his breathing uneven, each inhale shallow and uncertain. The ache in his chest had become a steady pressure now, like a weight resting where his heart should have been. Every beat felt louder, harder, as if it were echoing in the quiet room. He opened his eyes slowly. The ceiling seemed farther away than before. Light from the attic window faded as the sky outside darkened, shadows stretching across the walls. The familiar shapes in the room, the box of drawings, the folded blanket, the slanted ceiling, looked distant, as though he were viewing them through water. Eli tried to sit up. His body refused. A small sound escaped his lips, barely more than air. He swallowed and tried again. Dad? He whispered. The word felt heavy. He waited. Downstairs, the television volume increased slightly. Laughter burst from the screen, loud and sudden. Eli flinched. He gathered all the strength he had left and spoke again, this time a little louder. Dad! The word floated into the silence and disappeared. No footsteps, no voice, no response. His vision blurred as tears filled his eyes. Not dramatic tears, just quiet ones that slipped down his temples and into his hair. He thought about all the times he had stayed quiet so others wouldn't be bothered. All the times he had swallowed words before they could become a problem. All the times he had told himself that being unseen was safer than being rejected. Now he wondered if it had cost him everything. His breathing became shallow, uneven. Each breath felt like work. His hands trembled as he pressed one against his chest, hoping it would somehow help. "I don't feel good," he whispered to the room. The room remained still. Downstairs, plates clinked as dinner was finished. Chairs scraped across the floor. The sound of a phone vibrating broke the quiet. Answered, then dismissed. Life continued. Eli closed his eyes, then opened them again, afraid of what might happen if he didn't. He thought about school, about the teacher who once smiled at him and said, "You're so independent," about the classmates who never meant to leave him out. They just didn't think of him at all, about the neighbors who waved politely, assuming someone else was looking after him. His chest tightened again, sharper this time. He gasped softly, clutching the blanket. "I'm scared," he whispered. For the first time, he wasn't trying to be brave. The attic window rattled as a breeze passed through, making the light flicker briefly. Shadows danced across the wall, moving like figures that almost looked alive. Eli reached out, as if expecting someone to take his hand. No one did. He struggled to his side, his movements slow and unsteady. His box of drawings tipped over, spilling papers across the floor. One slid close to his hand. It was the drawing of the house, the one with many windows, the one dark window. Eli stared at it, his breathing growing weaker. "That's me," he whispered, finally saying it out loud. Tears fell freely now, not because he wanted sympathy, but because he finally understood how deeply he had been forgotten. Downstairs, his stepmother turned off the kitchen light. "Did you check on Eli?" his father asked casually, already heading toward the couch. "He's probably upstairs," she replied. "He's always fine on his own." The words settled heavily in the air. Always fine. In the attic, Eli heard nothing. He lay still, his eyes fixed on the ceiling as his breaths grew farther apart. The pressure in his chest eased slightly, not because he felt better, but because his body was growing tired of trying. His thoughts slowed. Images drifted through his mind. His drawings, the tree, the balloon, the words "I am still here" written in crayon. "I am still here," he mouthed silently. But the words felt lighter now, fragile. The house settled into nighttime silence. Lights clicked off one by one. Doors closed. Footsteps faded. No one climbed the stairs. No one opened the attic door. The moment passed, a moment that could never be taken back, and in the quiet space beneath the roof, a forgotten child waited, hoping, listening, fading, while the world below slept peacefully, unaware that it had missed something that would haunt it forever. Morning came gently, unaware of what the night had taken. Sunlight spilled across Maplewood Lane, warm and golden, touching rooftops, cars, and windows as if blessing everything it reached. Birds chirped. A jogger passed by. A garbage truck rumbled in the distance. The house looked peaceful, too peaceful. Inside, the clock in the hallway ticked steadily, marking time that no longer mattered the way it used to. Downstairs, Eli's father moved through his morning routine, coffee in hand, eyes half open. "Is Eli up yet?" he asked absently. His stepmother glanced at the clock. "He usually is. Probably already upstairs doing his thing." They didn't question it. They never had. Minutes passed, then more. The house felt different. Not silent exactly, but hollow. As if something important had quietly slipped away during the night and left a space no one had noticed yet. Eli's father grabbed his keys, then paused. "Why is the attic light still on?" he muttered. His stepmother froze. "What?" He looked up toward the ceiling. "I don't usually see that light on in the morning." Something uncomfortable stirred between them. "Go check," she said, trying to sound calm. He nodded and walked toward the stairs. Each step creaked louder than usual, or maybe it just felt that way. The higher he climbed, the heavier his chest became, though he couldn't explain why. At the attic door, he hesitated. He knocked once. No answer. Eli, he called louder this time. Silence. He opened the door. The attic smelled the same, dust, old wood, quiet, but the room felt wrong. Too still, too empty. Then he saw him. Eli lay on the mattress, small and unmoving, his blanket half pulled aside. Papers were scattered across the floor, drawings spread like fallen leaves. For a moment his father just stood there, unable to process what he was seeing. Eli, he whispered. No response. Panic surged. He rushed forward, dropping to his knees, gently shaking Eli's shoulder. Hey, wake up! Wake up! Nothing. His hand trembled as he reached for Eli's chest, desperate to feel movement, warmth. Something. The world seemed to tilt. No! His voice cracked. Eli! Please! Footsteps thundered behind him as his stepmother rushed in. One look at the scene, and her hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God! Her knees gave out beside him. The house that had once felt normal now felt unbearably loud, filled with broken breaths, whispered apologies, and a realization that came far too late. Emergency calls were made. Doors were thrown open. Voices filled the house. But the attic remained unchanged. The drawings told a story no one had bothered to read. A boy under a tree, a balloon floating away, a house with many windows, one dark window, and one final drawing, placed carefully near Eli's hand. It showed a small boy sitting in an attic, light shining through a window. Above him, written shakily but clearly, were the words, I just wanted to be seen. His stepmother sobbed openly now, clutching the paper as if it might undo everything. I didn't know, she cried. I swear, I didn't know. But the attic walls did. The stairs did. The silence did. Neighbors gathered outside as the news spread, their faces filled with shock and regret. The teachers would later remember how quiet he was, how polite, how easy, too easy. At school, his desk sat empty, his chair untouched, his name still written neatly on the corner of the board. A counselor stood in front of the class that day, speaking softly about feelings, about noticing one another, about how sometimes pain doesn't look loud. Some students cried, others stared at the floor. Everyone wished they had spoken to him just once more. Days later, the attic door remained closed, the light was off, but the memory of it lingered, burned into the hearts of those who finally understood that neglect doesn't always look like cruelty. Sometimes it looks like forgetting. Eli didn't ask for much. He didn't scream. He didn't demand. He didn't cause trouble. He just waited, and the waiting broke him. Now, his story traveled far beyond Maplewood Lane, shared in whispers, tears, and lessons learned too late. People spoke his name with regret, promising themselves they would do better. Notice more. Listen longer. Love louder. Because somewhere in some quiet room, another child might be waiting, just like Eli did. So here's the question that remains. Long after the tears have dried, how many forgotten children are still waiting to be seen? And will we notice them before it's too late? Let hear what you think in the comment section. If this story touched you, kindly share, like, and heat the subscription button on your screen. Let us know where you are watching from.